everyone. Welcome to the July RAC class. Today's discussion is about telescope collimation, and our presenter is Naveen. Naveen is active in the imaging group and serving as co-chair of the RAC Astronomy Club. He enjoys sharing views of the night sky through eyepieces and through his photography.
All right. Thanks, Anna. All right, so let me turn me down. Who here has collimated a telescope before? All right. Who was scared when they did it? It's daunting because you got to get everything lined up just right. And it took me a while to try to collimate anything. Let me move this down a little bit. So I started off with refractors just for that reason, but I got over it. I've got an SCT I use now and a couple Newtonians. So we're going to talk through collimating those today. But what is collimation, first of all? Basically, when you're looking through the eyepiece, you're looking through glass or you're looking at light reflected off of multiple mirrors, and you need to line all those mirrors up so that light can get to your eye in a way where it's, going to be an in focus. Sorry, eye glare.
This is Blair.
But why do you need it? So focus is one of the main things. I read that if you're bad, enough out of collimation, you're not going to be able to focus. Funny story, I took my Dob one time to an outreach event, and I'll talk about it later, but usually your secondary mirror, which is the angled one at the front near the eyepiece, usually you don't have to collimate that one. I showed up at the outreach event and it was just dangling. Like, whoa, this is a problem. So that would have been very bad to focus. As you get better collimation, you get better focus, of course. And then if you have faster optics, your focal ratio is smaller. The faster the optics, the more the collimation matters. And focus and therefore collimation is really important for astrophotography, which is where I got into astronomy. So I've spent time to understand how to dial in an imaging Newtonian, which I have on the table over there, for the purposes of astrophotography. There are probably other techniques. I know Steve Christensen brought some tools for collimating an SCT, which I've never used. And maybe after the class of people of interest, we can talk about that as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about refractors and SCTs. I'm mostly going to spend time on Newtonians. And then we'll have time for some hands-on. There's 3 Newtonians off to the side there. We've got an SCT, which hadn't planned on trying to collimate. But Steve also brought an artificial star. I don't know if we need to have dark room to do that because I've never tried it. Typically not. So maybe if people are interested, we can play with that. And then as we go, if you have questions, please raise your hand. We have a microphone can bring to you, or I can repeat the question into the microphone. There are some people on Zoom. And yeah, if I have anything wrong, please raise your hand and let me know so everybody else can understand the right way to do whatever. And yeah. All right. So refractor collimation. So just don't. But seriously, you can collimate a refractor. I'm just going to talk about it. I did not bring this tool. This is a collimating Cheshire eyepiece. I have a 5-inch refractor at home that I've tried this technique on. I think it's in collimation, and it's just got other problems. Your mileage may vary. So I'm not going to cover this a lot. Generally, if you have a collimation issue with a refractor, you ship it off to the manufacturer, and they'll fix it. Right, there, make sure it's not tilt. So there's other things I'll hit at the end, but we can talk briefly. Like usually you need to look at other things first. Is it tilt? If you're doing imaging, do you have back focus issue? Do you have pinched optics, like your tube rings are too tight? Those kinds of things. Try everything else before collimation with a refractor. But the idea is you take this eyepiece thingy, which is similar to, well, probably in the room, it's not easy to see, probably easy enough on the screen. It's got a disc inside that's slanted, and then on the end, it's got a crosshair. And the idea is you put it in your eyepiece, in the focuser, you shine a light into this opening, and you close off the optic, like the objective end, so it's dark, and that light goes in, and you're supposed to see a reflection of the crosshair off of the objective lens. So I say supposed to because it took me a while before I thought I might be seeing the reflection. And then if it's not lined up, you're supposed to be able to adjust it with there's typically going to be push-pull screws for the objective end. And I just put that out there in case people are feeling creative and want to try it out. No?
As you say, all of a sudden your voice dropped.
My voice
I wasn't
dropped?
sure. Turned off, I guess now.
No? Did you tune? No? Do I need to move the mic?
No, you're-
Okay.
I'm sitting right next.
Okay. So I'm not sure I've had success with this method. I think after I've made this slide, I was able to see the reflection, but just putting it out there to say, like, it is in theory possible. And it may work better with a shorter refractor, a smaller refractor. That's the examples I've seen, YouTube videos and whatnot, are with smaller refractors. But that's all I'm going to say about refractors. Usually you send it off or it's other problems. As Steve mentioned, probably other things like pinched optics, check your focuser, tilt, back focus if you're imaging. Typically not doing this at home. All right, any questions? No? SCT collimation. I'm going in order from like easiest, where like refractors just don't do it, to the harder one where you have multiple mirrors to move around with Newtonian. SCT is pretty straightforward. We do have one over on the side we can take a look at later. The way this telescope works, if you're not familiar, there's a corrective lens here in the front. Light goes through that, bounces off of a mirror in the back to the secondary mirror, which is this center disc, and then bounces back again through a hole in the back, and your eyepiece is in the back of the telescope. The collimation for this is the secondary only. There's no collimation for the primary mirror. You don't change anything with the corrector plate. It's just the secondary. So we'll talk really quickly about how you do that. I've tried to put tools and stuff here. So we're going to be looking at the secondary mirror. We need an Allen wrench. We need a bright star or an artificial star, though please don't use the sun. And then we're going to align the mirror. So the way I've done it, and I say that because like with the tool up here that Steve brought in is probably different. Get the star centered in the field of view. Defocus it a lot, like a whole lot. You don't want to like no longer be able to see it, but you want to see a very large ring. And you'll see, actually, let me skip forward. So on the right-hand side is very out of collimation. You see the rings are offset. The goal is to have them all centered around the center point where the star used to be, and concentric, well balanced. If they're not, adjust it. And the way you do that is, the way I've done it at least, is when it's out of collimation, I'll put my hand above the corrector plate near one of the screws and see where my hand casts a shadow. Is it here? Is it over here? Is it over there? And what you want in this case is you want the shadow to be here or the shadow to be here. And that tells you, all right, that's the screw I need to push in or out. I'm not sure which one. Okay, which direction? So I'll pick a direction. Let's say we're gonna push in. That means we're gonna tighten it a little bit. First, you go to the opposing two screws. There's always three. Loosen the other two just a little bit. And I go back to that one and tighten it again just a little bit. I did this on my SCT a month or so ago. I don't know. The last time we had to clear skies, which seems like forever ago. And it wasn't this badly out of collimation, but it was enough that I'm like, oh, I could tweak this a little bit. I loosened and tightened just enough to like break the tension of the screw, and that was it. No measurement of like a 16th of a turn or anything. It was just ding, just the tiniest little bit. And that was enough to make a difference. So microscopic small movements. Back to the text really quick. So if they're not centered, push, pull, do small adjustments. And say here, a quarter turn of the screw would be massive, it's huge. Do not loosen all the screws at the same time. Don't tighten them all at the same time. Don't remove them. And as I said, putting a hand in front of the objective lens just to see where your shadow casts within the rings is useful. And once you're done, you're done. Don't tighten it anymore. Things to be aware of. As I said, don't remove all the screws. I can't remember if the secondary will fall out, but it's not generally good. I've bought these devices called Bob's knobs, so I don't need an Allen wrench. And you can see it on a couple of my scopes I brought in. You just have a knob that you can turn. The instructions for replacing the secondary screws say take one out, put the new Bob's knob in, tighten it, enough, take the next one out, like do them one at a time. So taking them all out bad. One of the nice things though is that typically you don't have to collimate. I think the last time I collimated my SCT was a year ago, and it was pretty close. I didn't really notice anything improved in my imaging, so I use it for astrophotography. But it typically doesn't need to be recollimated. It's easy to check though. You just find a bright star, defocus, see what it looks like. All right. Before we move on to SCTs, any questions, comments? Did I miss anything? Any technique somebody else uses? Jim in the back. I'll repeat.
All three at the same time, and if you lose too far, the mirror will fall.
Okay, Jim says that if you loosen the screws too much, the mirror will fall out. That would be bad.
Don't have your SCT at an angle.
Don't have your SCT in an angle, yes. Well, don't loosen all the screws first, but yeah.
Or have an accident.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so yeah. So don't do it at an angle. I will mention that too with the Newtonians. Don't do it at an angle because you don't have a corrector plate. You have tools drop down on your primary, which would be horrific. Rob, how far away does an artificial star have to be? I have no idea. Never used one. Steve?
I usually put them 30 feet.
30 feet usually?
It depends on the artificial star and how bright it is.
Okay. Depends on the star, how bright.
Inside or outside. Usually inside, you can't do it that far away.
Okay, yeah.
Take it outside.
Yeah. Okay, so 30 feet or more depends on if you're inside, outside.
If it's too far away, you can't get it, see it. Too close.
Yeah.
It's too bright or something.
I think there's some math you can do on how long your focal length is.
I have instructions.
Okay, so instructions there. Okay. Rob, maybe after the presentation, we can play with the one we have here, because Steve did bring one in. We can maybe commandeer one of these tripods for the presentation cam or something. Dana.
So you have a couple of comments.
Okay.
Worth noting, SCTs can adjust collimation by the corrector plate. It's very rare to have to do that, really only necessary for hyperstar users or marshals, whichever. And then there are 4 pegs that adjust on the side of the scope. Don't mess with them unless you know what you're doing. That was him.
Okay.
And then a question was, is there a way to use a laser collimator with an SCT?
I don't know. That's a good question. Does anybody know? Can you use a laser collimator?
There is a full tech has a device. It's like a square board that has 3 lasers.
I got it right here.
Oh, you have it. So that laser collimator from Astro Tech or something like that.
Okay.
They have 3
Hotech has one that's laser based. Okay. Okay. I've never used one, so maybe we can, when we play with the artificial star with the SCT, we can try that out as well if we have time.
And Steve Blake is saying he won a Zamel collimator in a RAC ravel. He's offered to give it to me chat here.
right? That's believing. I heard laughing. I'm sure that was, yeah, okay. Onward, Newtonians. All right, this is the one that was really scary for me because coming into astrophotography, I've heard Newtonians are really good, but collimation, scary. So I stayed away for a little bit. And why is it scary? You've got a primary mirror. You look in like the Dob or these newts over here. You look down the tube, there's a primary mirror at the back. You got to adjust that. And you've got the secondary mirror on a spider vane at the front, which reflects the light out the side to your eyepiece or camera or whatever. And it's all got to be lined up. There's a lot of things that need to be adjusted. You got secondary rotation, tilt, and primary tilt. But it's really not that bad. So you need a screwdriver and an Allen wrench for the secondary if it needs to be collimated. And there's a bunch of tools you can use. I'm going to go through 3 that I know. There are probably more. A sight tube, a laser collimator, a collimation cap, and then optionally a sheet of paper just to make the secondary mirror easier to see. Because when you look through the focus tube to your secondary mirror, it's kind of hard to pick out unless you have something in the background, in my opinion, when you're trying to make sure you have the thing rotated properly. And we'll get to that. So with the sight tube, and for these, I have all the tools. I have my sight tube here, and it can be adjusted in length. It's got a crosshair on one end, and on the other end, it's got a small hole. Put this in the focuser, and this is for the initial, actually, no, sorry. We're going to do collimation completely with the sight tube. So as I said, I put a sheet of paper behind the secondary mirror. So from the focuser, secondary, and then a sheet of paper just to make it show up a little better. So we're going to put the sight tube into the focuser. And we want to make sure we don't hit the secondary mirror with the sight tube. Just be careful, please. Always have your hand on it until you lock the screws in and make sure it's not going to move. And if you're going to be adjusting the focuser to move it in and out, look to see where it is inside so you don't accidentally scratch your secondary. And the idea is that you get it so that you can see the secondary mirror, and it fills the view except for a slight gap. And you want to adjust that mirror so that it's filling that secondary, the sight tube, except for an even gap all the way around. So it's spherical from the perspective of the sight tube through your focuser. So I've got a series of pictures. We'll walk through the different steps. So if you see here, you've got this gap. So this outer ring is the sight tube. You've got a gap, and then you have the secondary mirror here. The bright part here is your primary mirror. Ignore it. Oops. Just ignore the primary mirror. It takes a little bit, like, got to switch that off in your brain, like, that's not in the right place. Like, no, it's not. It's okay. We'll get to it. And then you have the secondary mirror reflection here. It's also not where it's supposed to be, but we'll get to that in a later step as well. So first, you want that secondary centered with this, and it's circular, so you have a nice gap all the way around that looks even. Jim.
And it is the most important part.
Okay.
If you don't have that place right, it's line oval, rotated, then you can do an alignment and the scope of work, but it really will not be properly aligned. And for me, this is the hardest thing to get perfect and the most annoying. You can spend a long time doing it. But once you have it right, that does need to be.
Yeah. So
you can make a homemade tube. I think a lot of you can get one of these 1 1/4 sinking first that goes into bathroom vanity sink, and they're very cheap. And I have one, and I sprayed the inside flat black. I use it because it looks like a cat, like you're printing.
yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, I'll repeat real quick. Jim is saying this is the most important step. Get this right, spend the time. If it's slightly oval, it's a problem. You can make your own sight tube with plumbing parts. And I've got some collimation caps up here that I 3D printed. I guess you could, basically put something like this on the end of a PVC pipe that's been painted black and have a reasonable sight tube. All right, thank you. All right. So once you've done that, you need to do the more fine-tuned adjustment of getting the secondary aligned with the primary mirror. Now with the sight tube method, you have your sight tube in. You want to, I think. Okay, I have it written down. That's right. I don't use this method myself very often. So you want to get the primary mirror reflection that we saw in that previous picture that was off, and the primary mirror centered. Well, clicker. All right. So now you can see in this step, still using the sight tube, we've got the primary mirror centered within the secondary mirror. You can see the primary mirror clips. There's 3 of them hanging out. That's fine. And we're ready to move on to the last step. Now, we loosen the primary mirror's locking screws. There's a pair of screws. One is to lock the mirror in place, and one is to move it. If you don't loosen the locking screw, it's not going to do anything. You could possibly strip the adjustment screw. So you loosen the primary locking screws, and then line up that crosshair that we have at the end of the sight tube with the reflection of the crosshair you'll see in the mirrors. Just iterate until it's lined up, and then you're done. And you see in the last picture, you got the crosshair that was in this smaller circle here, which is the secondary, is now lined up with the crosshairs from the sight tube. When you're done, you need to tighten the lock screws again on your primary mirror. I think of it like tightening the lug nuts on a tire, and that you don't do like as tight as you can on each one at a time. You do go around a couple times. Otherwise, you can cause the primary to move. And also, once you're done tightening the lock screws, check the collimation again, because it's possible you could have shifted a little bit. All right, before we move on to laser, any comments on the process in general, the 3 things you need to do, or using a sight tube, which I've said I don't generally use one myself. I use it for that initial step. I think it's really great for centering and getting a nice circle for your secondary mirror, but I use other stuff for the other steps. Okay. Using a laser collimator, again, a screwdriver and an Allen wrench. For this, we can do the secondary alignment and the primary. The biggest problem with a laser collimator is your laser collimator has to be collimated. And I'm pretty sure mine is not. You can spend a lot of money to get one that comes collimated. If you're not sure, basically hold it stationary, maybe on the edge of a table where it's not going to move. So that's not great. I want a fixture, and just rotate it. You could put it in your focuser, see where the laser hits the primary mirror, and rotate it as long as there's no play, and see if the laser stays in one spot or if it's making a little circle. If it's making a little circle, it's not collimated. I still use mine anyway, like that's good enough. So you put it into your focuser, turn it on, and I think, so this is not for the initial alignment. Like I think the sight tube is what you want to use there. I don't know if there's any alternatives to using a sight tube for the secondary initial alignment. But I use this actually with my Dob to you want to get for the secondary alignment with the primary. So you turn on the laser and the laser bounces off the secondary and hits the primary. Look through the front end of the tube, and you want that laser to hit the center of your primary mirror. Typically, there's a circle in your primary, and you would just want to center the laser in that circle. And you do that like you would have done with the previous step of adjusting the screws, the Allen wrenches on the secondary mirror. After that, you align the primary mirror by looking at where the laser hits this reticle inside the device. You want to just get the laser to be centered within that. So it's basically going bounce out, hit the secondary, go to the primary, bounce back to the secondary, and go exactly where it started in your laser collimator. And you do that like you would have done with the sight tube in that final adjustment. Loosen your locking screws, adjust the primary mirror, and then tighten the locking screws. All right. Rob.
Collimator, but the laser needs to be collimated. So how can you tell?
You mentioned that the laser collimator needs to be collimated. So what's the, how do we know if the laser is not collimated? Is that only done at the factory and we just hope it is?
Well, I haven't played with mine, but it's got 3 Allen set screws in it. So my assumption is that I can use those 3 to tweak where the laser is, push pull like you would do with the collimation. So maybe this is the next level. I'm scared of doing that. I don't want to mess with it, or I'm too lazy. I don't know which, but I haven't done that yet. As far as like figuring out if it needs to be collimated, I think the best tool is probably your telescope itself, assuming, as I said, that you don't have any significant play within the focus tube when you put it in there, because that's going to keep it in one place as you rotate it. And so you can see if it's making a circle. Like I assume that it would hit the center and stay there, but I think, and we can play with this particular one after in one of these scopes and just see, is it collimated? I don't know.
There are YouTube videos.
There are videos for how to, yeah.
I know there are YouTube videos on how to push.
Okay.
Laser collimators to see if they collimate.
Okay.
Just have to Google it. YouTube it.
Yeah, Steve mentioned there's videos, YouTube, that'll have information on how to check it and collimate it. All right, collimation caps. So this is not for aligning the secondary mirror. And as Dana is showcasing for us, they make nice hats. I have a pile of them up here. If you're interested in taking one home, you're welcome to. I 3D printed them, and I have, I think it's a fender washer inside for a reflective bit. I tried some paint, but it just wasn't reflective enough, and like it just didn't work well. But I think these turned out pretty well. And I painted the outside black because after I painted with random filaments, I'm like, it's too bright. I had this green one, I think, is the first color I printed. And putting your eye next to green and trying to pay attention to what's going on through a tiny circle, it did not work. Okay, so your secondary alignment's done. Like we've used other tools. You put the collimation cap in your focuser and do what you've done before, primary mirror alignment. You loosen all the locking screws, and then you adjust until you see the collimation cap reflection line up with that dot or ring on your primary mirror. I don't have a picture of this, but we have several scopes over here. Hopefully people can walk by and take a look at what it actually looks like. And then again, lock your locking screws again. Things to be aware of. Do your secondary alignment while your scope is horizontal. You do not want to drop an Allen wrench on your primary mirror. You don't want to drop your secondary mirror, period, but you also don't want to drop your secondary on your primary. That'd be double bad. Laser collimator needs to be collimated. Thankfully, the secondary adjustment doesn't have to be done very often. I've had it go out while driving though, where my secondary was literally just flopping around. I don't know how, but I guess the center screw had loosened while I was driving, hitting up potholes or something. So having the tools with you to do secondary collimation, good idea. And I would check the primary mirror collimation anytime you set up. It will go out. It's a large piece of glass. And that's it for the spoken part of the presentation. Any questions, comments before we, go off and start playing with some telescopes?
So with an SCT, if we do it horizontally, sometimes they have tilt in the.
In the primary, yeah, SCT primaries, yeah.
This-
I don't know how best to deal with that. I personally, I'm just careful not to loosen the screws a lot, so I'm not gonna have my secondary fall. I'm just going to a bright star and it's been going fine, but that's a good point. Like the primary mirror and an SCT can move around, so.
Right, so I would think that I would prefer to do it pointing up to a star because it's most likely when I'm imaging. I'm
Right.
pointing up, so I'm.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's a question of what risks you're willing to
Yeah.
take and what mitigations you put in place. So, like I said, I don't loosen the screws much, so. And I haven't had anything fall off yet, so. Dana.
So Gary Scott put in the chat that this is the one he uses and he's got it. It's astrosystems.biz.
Okay,
And there's a link in here. If anybody wants it, let me know.
okay. For doing what?
For collimating my Newtonian. I have a 18-inch obsession.
Why are we not getting
I use.
sound out of the speaker?
So I heard you, Gary. It's for collimation of his SCT.
SCT, okay, great.
No, not SCT,
No?
but my obsession, Newtonian.
Ah.
Doxonian telescope.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And what's nice about it is that you have this little the little they're basically the magnet. I don't know if you can see that little picture. You see basically this little white thing that clips on the back of the laser collimator. That actually gives you a reflection on the right hand side of the secondary, and you can see how well it's centered. So I find that pretty handy.
Oh, is that it right there, Dana?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's being,
The image on the right is actually what's being reflected back to the secondary.
okay,
And you can see that and as you adjust the primary mirror, you can basically center that on the secondary.
cool.
There's a little write up on it in that link that I sent. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Anything else, Dana? No? All right. Dean?
So, sorry, I'm not. So I know Jim knows this for sure. There's gonna be other levels, especially for the Newtonian. And they're made pretty well today so that you can do the demonstration and whatnot that Naveen says. But if you ever happen to inherit one or have one with a homemade Newtonian or one with a bent spider, there's all sorts of deeper rabbit holes to go with aligning the spider and aligning the focuser. And if you ever have a scope that's not truly a modern scope, but it looks like it's pretty old, it looks like it's been mangled maybe, you may not be able to get the collimation just by these three little screws on the secondary. But just be aware, most people, in most of the factory scopes today, start off pretty good. The spiders are all aligned, everything's in good shape. You don't have to do a whole lot But if you really get in trouble, there's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down that you probably don't want to go down one day.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess this all assumes your spider is well centered, and tight enough, right? Right. So, yeah, I've taken the spiders out of my two Newtonians, and you have to make sure that that they're centered back in the tube before you do anything. So if you take apart a scope, there's more stuff to do. All right. Oh, and then Dean, we were talking before this, sometimes like it's something I just do and don't think about when trying to do the secondary alignment, and knowing which screw to move. I'll just reach in and grab the post behind the mirror and just torque it around while looking through the focus tube, just to see what motion I need to do with the screws. As long as you're not touching glass, it's okay. All right. Anything else? No?
Any other questions? Any other questions on chat? Because we're going to shut the Zoom call down and the recording will stop when we go to demonstration.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining.